All right, shalom, shalom. I want to start off with giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Dash. I want to say and give double honor to the apostles and the bishop elders of Great Millstone for teaching us this word in truth and sincerity and for ruling well. And salutations to the elect. Lord willing, we're part of the elect with some of those men and women that believe and fear in the name of Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, and are patiently waiting for the day of salvation, which is the day of our redemption. And my brother Kabar Yahweh from GMS Hawaii, coming to you with another quick lesson. And breaking news all day has been breaking news. The assassination of what could be deemed an assassination of so-called public figure, this guy Charlie Kirk, right? A right-wing MAGA supporting Edomite, right? Who loved to fawn himself the man of all opinions, and like he had real understanding about particular topics, and he was really just a talking head. And a lot of his rhetoric was centered around so-called black violence, and it was spiritual. When the Lord took him up off of here, he got caught in the middle of a sentence, right, attributing mass shootings to gang violence, right, which, like, in recent years, they just started calling gang violence and shootings mass shootings. I believe it was like a few years ago where they started deeming gang violence mass shootings. And that's for a purpose, right? So that they can come down on those perpetrators and possibly put even terroristic charges against them for mass shootings. And by labeling something a mass shooting, it garners a lot of attention. And so he was in the middle of responding to a question in regards to mass shootings and transsexuals, and then he added Jake in it, like they always do. They co-opt our grievances and our so-called movements, and these Labiqua people, that's the word Aldi Ashimwamba introduced to us today, but these Labiqua people, they co-opt these movements where Jake was basically trying to express their grievances with their conditions here in America. And long story short, this man was taken out. Yeah, he was taken out the day it was clear. Everybody could see it. Right? It's for everybody to see. It was on Front Street. And so it reminded me of Haman, as well as Antiochus Epiphanes IV, because both of these men, they plotted against our people, right? And I wanted to open up with a precept from Revelation chapter 12, verse 10. And it says, I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our power and the powers of Hamashiach, and the power of his Hamashiach, his anointed. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before the Most High day and night. Now, when you look up that in the AMP and the NLT, it says, then I heard a loud voice in the NLT, then I heard a loud voice shouting across the heavens, it has come at last, salvation and power in the kingdom of our power and the authority of his anointed. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down to earth, the one who accuses them before our power day and night. In the AMP it says, then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom, which is dominion reign, right, of our power, the authority of his anointed have come. For the accuser of our believing brothers and sisters have been thrown down at last. He who accuses them and keeps bringing charges against sinful behavior, keeps bringing charges of sinful behavior against them before our power day and night. And that's what these talking heads do, right? These priests on the left-hand side, they set Jacob in a slippery slope, right? You read Habakkuk chapter 2, it tells you that woe to him that giveth his neighbor's drink, that he may look upon his nakedness. And here it is, Esau set the environments up for the situation that comes from that. This guy, he never wanted to attribute poverty and, segregation and intrinsic racism as a leading reason why you see violence in the so-called black Latino neighborhoods, which that kind of activity is really associated with poverty, right? And even Chat GTP said that right here. It says, I asked the question, were issues on black and gang violence in America founded in truth? Were his issues His is Charlie Kirk. It says, what Charlie Kirk claims. Charlie Kirk said that there is a disturbing pattern of black Americans being disproportionately involved in violence, especially in urban corridors. His framing suggests he sees blackness itself as a major factor in gang or violent crime, and that's what they do. They associate everything negative, wicked, and evil with us. First of all, we're not black. We're different shades of brown. Just like this man, he wasn't white. He was just a different shade of pink and red. Okay? And their notion is that if you're black, you're violent. Or you're prone to violence. Or you're predisposed to violence. And because this violence takes place a lot in urban corridors, pretty much where Jake lived at. And from time to time, it spills over to the other nations. Right? Like Trump made a big deal about this Ukrainian refugee woman being stabbed to death by a Jake on a bus. He showed a picture, and it was reminiscent of George Bush and the crack epidemic. And when George Bush pulled that big ass bag of crack out of his desk, right? Which their whole thing was a setup, right? They had set this Jake up, this young guy, up to buy crack outside of the White House, right? Outside of the White House, just so that they can make a public display of it, right? He pulled the crack out. Yeah, he pulled the big ass thing of crack out of his President Crack. He pulled the thing of crack out of his drawer, right? And said that this was the scourge of the world and of the nation, holding up a baggie of crack, you know. And he held that shit up like this is what really be happening. But mind you, Esau created crack, right? He created the environment for the crack and then gave it to the mouse, which are the black Latino neighborhoods, to purposely destroy them. And then they use these laws, they use this crack epidemic, so-called crack epidemic, to push forward grievous laws. Just like Donald Trump holds picture of Ukrainian woman and her killer, right? Yeah, Trump held the picture up. Trump held this picture up during this picture right here, he held it up during an address, a short address, right? They showed this picture of the Ukrainian woman. She's a quintessential white woman. Let's get a better one. She's a quintessential white woman from the Ukraine, so-called beautiful blonde hair. And then they showed the evil black man, dreads, bugged out. You know what I'm saying? He's supposed to be violent and all these other things, right? And it's the same thing. They do this to what? To set precedents. So the laws that they bring out, well, they're going to be harsh and draconian, but they're going to affect our people, right? So again, this man sets up the environment to destroy our people, right? But the Lord turned it around on this guy today, right? He was spewing all this shit, all this anti-Israelite, anti-Jake hatred, and he ended up getting shot. And what? How did he die? Gun violence. Gun violence. That's how he passed away, right? Again, the accuser of our brethren, which he's taken down, and he's just an example, because the real accusers are the super elite. They're the ones that go to the Lord on the left-hand side via their priests and warlocks, and what they're doing is they're trying to protest the Lord loving us and having mercy upon us, even though our people are gone, doing wickedness and evil, right? So again, Revelation 12:10 in the AMP says, "Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation of the power and the kingdom, dominion reign of our power, the authority of his anointed have come. For the accuser of our believing brothers," and the accusers are the Edomites, right? And then when you see shit like this, they're not just specifically targeting certain Jakes. All of us get thrown into this vacuum of violence, even though we're not committing that shit. All of us get thrown into the vacuum of a terrible people or wicked people. And yeah, there's wicked people amongst Jake, but that ain't all of us. But when an Edomite do something, it's a one-off. It's like, oh, it was just him. All so-called white people aren't considered mass shooters or mass pedophiles or none of that. They don't all walk around with that stigma that Jake has to walk around with, even though we're not like that. Even if we're not like that, these Edomites, they always second guess being around Jake because of shit like this. And then it gets amplified via the governments and these different talking heads. It gets amplified so that they can run precedents. But yet, when these Edomites commit crimes, it's not amplified. It's just another. It's like a watershed moment. The same thing that happened. It was a bunch of gun violence today in both the so-called white neighborhoods or white corridors, as well as the so-called black and Latino corridors. One, it entered this man's corridor at one of his so-called rallies, right? These Edomites, these right-wing Edomites, these MAGA hat-wearing demons, he was their guy, right? And who knows who could have took this man out? It could have been a government psyop. It could have been anything because this dude was gathering a lot of attention, right? He was gathering a lot of fans, and people would have started following this dude had he didn't walk into politics, right? That could have played a role. Who knows? But anyway, going back to this, it says his framing suggests he sees blackness itself as a major factor in gang violent crime. So if you look like a so-called black man, then you're attributed to gang violence and violent crime. What data actually shows? The best way to check if his claims are founded in truth is to look at the crime data context, crime and race correlation. The FBI crime and statistics show that black Americans are overrepresented in violent crimes and arrests, especially homicide, relative to their share of the U.S. population, which is 13%. For example, in recent years, around 50 to 55% of homicide offenders are blacks. But who are they killing? They're killing their own people. They're not killing you Edomites en masse. And on top of the fact their neighborhoods are overly policed, right? You don't see that shit going on in the middle class suburbs like that. Not even in rural areas. So it says neighborhood and poverty factors. However, criminologists emphasize that crime correlates far more strongly with poverty. And who do you see concentrated in poverty more than any other nation on this planet? The Israelites, starting with your so-called Negroes and Latinos. Segregation and lack of opportunity than with race itself, because crime is just it's a symptom of something, right? People do things because they lack, right? And that's what you see, right? Many predominantly black neighborhoods also experience systemic, right, issues, underfunding, schools, job shortages, heavy policing, and intergenerational poverty. So this shit lasts forever with our people. So what you think you're going to get when you set up the environment to be that? Not to mention they're pumping chemicals all inside of us via their food, the water, the air, right? All manners of shit. Is that an excuse to be wicked and evil unto yourself? No, it's not. But they're underlying factors. And this guy never made mention of that. He just attributed you being black to being violent and killing people. When you control the socioeconomic status, neighborhood environment, racial disparities, and crime rate shrink significantly. Let's read that again. When you control for socioeconomic status and neighborhood environment, racial disparities and crime rate shrink significantly. So when people have the things they need, you ain't going to see racial crimes and disparities. You're not going to see too many disparities in it because everybody is living well. And crime is going to happen, but it ain't going to happen on the numbers that it does. Gang violence, gang activity is concentrated in areas of concentrated poverty, right? In some cities, Chicago, LA, and Baltimore, black and Latino gangs are more prominent because those communities are historically segregated into the poorest districts. But in other regions like rural America, white gangs or white meth and opioid networks dominate. You see, but they never get you never see that shit. You never see that on the news. You never see that in paper. You don't see that, right? They don't overemphasize gangs and drugs and violence in so-called white communities, but they do it to our people. It says framing Mrs. DeMark, saying that there's a pattern of blacks jumping people frames violence as a racialized behavior rather than a product of environment and policy. And that's not really happening like that. You ain't seeing Chinese people getting jumped in the ghetto. First of all, they don't even be up in there. You ain't seeing Edomites getting jumped and shot in the ghetto. First of all, they don't even be up in there. It's normally Jake on Jake, and it's easy to find a criminal because they have a small environment. And somebody's going to talk, and evidence is going to be plentiful, right? So when you over policing in these areas, it's different. I saw a video today of this Edomite. She was convicted of pedophile, right? Of her 11-year-old student. When the cops went to her house, they walked her out to the car like she was going to a taxi, right? They walked her out to the car like she was going to a taxi. Right? But if that was a Jake, he would have had the handcuffs on as soon as the door opened up, right? They were all polite to her and everything. Sat in the car, sat her in the front seat, all of that shit. You see, they're police different than we are, no matter what crimes they do, right? It overlooks the fact that most crime in interracial is interracial. Over 80% of black homicide victims are killed by other black people. But the same is true for whites. Most killed by whites. People commit crimes mostly against those of their own communities. You see? But this guy, he made it his mission, his life mission, to stir up racial insecurities, right? And he made a living out of that. He made a big living out of that. And then what happened to him? He ended up passing the day in front of all them Edomites. And I'm sure it was the Edomite that took him out. We'll never know because the guy got away. Nobody got arrested for that shit. This dude they put a hit out on this guy. All right? And so, just kind of like veering off from that, this is the book of Job, chapter 15, verse 6. Thine own mouth condemneth thee, and not I. Thine own lips testify against thee. And that's what happened to Esau. His own lips testified against him. While you were trying to make Jake the face of gun violence, you end up getting smoked today. And gun violence. He didn't grow up in the ghetto. Where he was at today in Utah, that wasn't any ghetto USA. That was Utah, which is predominantly white. Right? When you look up the race makeup of Utah, right? It says Utah's population is predominantly white at about 75%, according to 2020 census data, followed by Hispanics or Latino individuals, and a smaller percentage of Asians, 2.4%, and blacks at 1.1%, and American Indians / Alaska Natives, 2.24%, with a growing multiracial population of 3.7%. It says the state has a lower overall racial diversity compared to the U.S. as a whole, though the growth of black, Asian, and Pacific Islanders and Hispanic Latino populations are outpacing the state's overall population growth. So here it is. You went to a state. You went to not only did you go to a state, you went to a university that's predominantly white, right? And he got smoked, right? On live TV. He got smoked. They can't even cover it up. There's so many different angles to this dude's death. And it's reminiscent of Haman, right? Because all these Edomites, they plot against our people, right? They're plotting against our people. They're working for the higher ups. They're working for the small hats. They're working for the super elite, which are also small hats. And they set up to push a narrative. And because Esau is in power, his narrative is heard over the true narratives, right? Because Esau's narrative is lies. So it says, after these things, this is Esther 3:1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of the Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advance him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, right? Because that Edomite didn't deserve to be bowed to or show reverence. In fact, he's going to bow to us and show us reverence. So this man got upset because Mordecai didn't show him due respect. So did he just say, you know what, I'm going to smoke this guy, or I'm going to shoot that Mordecai? No. He said, I'm going to take the whole nation out. And that comes from that ancient hatred that they had. It says, then the king's servant which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Right? And in the first month, this is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king of Ahasuerus, they cast pur that it is the lot before Haman from that day to day and from month to month into the 12th month. That is the month of Adar. Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed. Mind you, he wanted to smoke everybody. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersing among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasures. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also to do with them as it seems good to thee. So here it is. This man plotted, not him, but Haman plotted against our people to get us destroyed. All because he didn't get the due reverence that he thought he deserved. But it ended up turning back on him. Right? I just want to get that. Right? You can read the book of Esther for the whole understanding. Haman's pride. Esther 5:9. Then went Haman forth the day of joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all things wherein the kings had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the prince and the servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And he was all hyped up like, yeah, I was invited to a banquet by myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the gate. Then says Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged. You know what I mean? He didn't even commit a sin to death. This dude just plotted to kill him because he didn't get the reverence that he deserved. That's an envious man. That's a wicked man. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Right? Haman must honor Mordecai. Go to it. I just want to get to the point. Haman hanged. And the king, this is Esther 7:7, and the king arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. And the king returned out of the palace of the garden and placed in a banquet and wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed wherein Esther was. Then said the king, well, he forced the queen also before me in the house. As for the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face, put a hood over his nigga head. And Habron, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. And so they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So this man, The same thing, the devices of the crafty and the wicked, they got turned on the wicked's head, right? Because how you going to explain this? It's the same thing with this dude, Charlie Kirk, right? All this talk about black gun violence and black violence and gang violence, and those are just buzzwords to get people all emotionally unstable. But now look at you. You got shot in the fucking neck at Utah University, possibly by an Edomite. We'll never know. Dude ain't gonna turn himself in. He gonna go home and cook a steak dinner and eat good. And keep on moving until he gotta assassinate the next guy. You see? But look, the Lord turned that on this guy. Right? He turned that on an accuser of our brothers. As soon as he said, you talking about gang violence or without gang violence, fucking got shot in the neck. In a jugular vein, bro. That whoever shot this guy was a professional, bro. He wasn't no damn Negro in the ghetto shooting each other for little or nothing. He wasn't a nigga moment. He wasn't some untrained so-called black man in America shooting and killing each other, holding the gun sideways. This dude got hit. He was a target hit. And it was smooth. One shot, one kill, out. While everybody was scrambling, trying to get to this dude, the guy was packing up and rolling. He was gone. By the time you heard that shot, he was out of there. Right? He was gone. So look, same thing happened to this Edomite today. There's another example of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. This is 2 Maccabees 9:1. About that time came Antiochus with this honor out of the country of Persia. For he had entered in a city called Persepolis and went about to rob the temple. The temple is the temple of our power. And he told and to hold the city. This wasn't our temple, Slakia. This is in Persepolis. And went about to rob the temple and to hold the city, whereupon a multitude running to defend themselves with their weapons put them to flight. And so it happened, Antiochus being put to flight, of the inhabitants returned with shame. Now when he had come to Ecbatana, news was brought to him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus, right? Then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done to him by those that made him flee. So he basically want to take out his loss on our people. Therefore commanded he his chariot man to drive without ceasing and to dispatch the journey to judgment of the Most High now following him. For he had spoken proudly in this sort that he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place of the Jews. So he basically said, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cemetery, man. But the Lord Almighty, the power of Israel, smote him with an incurable, invisible plague. For as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him, and sore torment out of his inner parts, and that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many strange torments. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging. So even him getting sick didn't stop that pride, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire. That's the devil, Salaki. Hey, Salaki about that. This is back in 2 Maccabees 9:7. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage. And that's what this guy was filled with. This guy, he died slandering our people. His last words was to slander the children of Israel. These Edomites act like they didn't establish America, and everywhere else they left a footprint at through violence, death, and murder. You talk about gang violence. You Edomites, you brought the gang violence, man. But because it happened, according to you, it happened so long ago, and you're so far removed from it, it's like, oh, it never happened, right? So you look at what's happening to the small hats, and you got empathy and sympathy for them. This dude said he ain't had no empathy, right? He ain't had no empathy. He said he hated empathy, right? You look up the definition for empathy, right? Empathy. It says the ability to understand and share feelings of another. So this dude, he didn't have the ability to understand or the feelings or share those feelings with the Israelites, right? So the Lord got this nigga and his slander. Right in the middle of his slander, he took this nigga off the earth, bruh. And now when he comes back, his big balloon-headed ass coming back in captivity, bruh. And they want you to feel sorry for this dude because he died. He got killed. He got murdered. because he left a wife and kids. Now your wife is going through what niggas going through. She's a single mother now. But I'm sure y'all got insurance. If you were smart, you got life insurance. You got a trust going, so your kids might be taken care of. But guess what? Your woman is a fucking single mother, right? That's what she is, because this nigga got put to death, right? And it says, but it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pain. So not only did he have a terrible disease in his stomach, but then the Lord threw this nigga off his chariot, so now his body was broken. And thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, in the way of the high mountains, and the balance was now cast on the ground and carried on a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of the Most High. And that's what happened to this dude. What happened to him today was the manifestation of the power of Yahweh B'Shem Shai, because Esau, no matter how much technology he got, no matter how many weapons he has access to, no matter how highly trained he is, he don't have the power over life and death. That's given to Yahweh B'Shem Shai. Right? And the Lord took him out, and he made it public. It's a beautiful thing. Right? The accuser of our brethren has been cast down. Right? He's an accuser. Right? He's a accuser. And he got put down. And the same thing gonna happen to you Edomites. Ain't no comeback story for America. Ain't no making America great again. All hell's breaking loose upon this earth, and it's gonna get worse. And even though Esau's gonna turn his horns on our people, it's rightfully deserved, because it's the judgment of the Lord. But at the end of the day, salvation is coming to our people. What you got coming to you? You nations got slavery and judgment coming to you, man. Get ready for death being an everyday occurrence in your wherever you're at. And with that, I'm saying shalom, on to the next.